Hi, my name is David Riley, and in just a moment I'm going to show you how a 56-year-old man who had been on blood pressure meds for 12 years, was regularly in a state of hypertensive crisis, had suffered 3 separate transient ischemic attacks, and whose own doctor warned him was just days away from a stroke, stunned the world of medical science by lowering his systolic blood pressure by 105 points and his diastolic blood pressure by 72 points in the space of just 17 days, transforming his health and adding years to his lifespan in the process. And the most amazing thing is, he achieved this remarkable turnaround using a 100% natural and completely safe homemade protocol, which required no medication of any kind. But what might shock you even more is that in just a few seconds from now, you're going to discover that despite what your doctors have been telling you, you don't actually need any medication to control your blood pressure at all, and never did. And you're probably going to become extremely angry once I tell you that the solution I'm about to reveal, which has been based on a world-renowned study into hypertension which has been published in countless peer-reviewed medical journals all over the world, has been deliberately suppressed by greedy and immoral pharmaceutical companies, who make billions from blood pressure meds like ACE inhibitors, angiotensin receptor blockers, calcium channel blockers, beta blockers, and more. And because of this, Big Pharma are doing everything in their power to keep the solution hidden from the very people who need it most. So, I urge you to keep watching, because as I speak, Big Pharma are trying to force me to take down this presentation, because they do not want you to find out that there is a simple and 100% natural way for you to quickly and dramatically lower your blood pressure and transform your health in a matter of days, so that you never need their blood pressure meds ever again. This simple and easy-to-follow method is based on a bizarre treatment method developed by a cardiologist and hypertension specialist who spent years studying a small and isolated tribe living in the depths of the Amazonian rainforest, and it has already been used to help 23,867 people of all ages to lower their blood pressure quickly, easily, and safely. Plus, what's even more amazing is that despite the incredible results that this method has achieved, it can be put into practice from the comfort of your own home, without the need for any medication of any kind, without the risk of any side effects, and without having to see any more doctors at all. So be sure to keep watching, because whether you've been suffering for 1 week or 10 years, are 30 or 90 years old, have mild or chronic hypertension, or are suffering from moderate to severe side effects because of your meds, I'm going to show you a fast, simple, and proven way for you to dramatically lower your blood pressure, transform your overall health and well-being, and potentially add years or even decades to your life. And you can do it in just 17 days. So put any plans you have on hold for just a few minutes and get comfortable, because it's absolutely crucial to your current and future health that you watch every single second of this controversial presentation, because it could save your life. Hi, as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, my name is David Riley, and the 56-year-old man I told you about earlier, who was able to dramatically lower his blood pressure and transform his long-term health in just 17 days, and with no medication in sight, was me. And I'm going to reveal exactly how I did it in just a second. But before I do, I just want to say that I completely understand if you're feeling a little bit skeptical right now. After all, what I am telling you today pretty much flies in the face of everything you've previously been told by doctors, specialists, and the medical establishment in general. In fact, if I were watching this video just 6 months ago, before I'd been able to experience this life-changing treatment for myself, I would have been skeptical too. To be honest, I wouldn't have believed it at all. Because like millions of my fellow Americans, I've been effectively brainwashed into thinking that medication was the best way to achieve a fast and permanent improvement in my blood pressure levels. But thankfully, I had an open mind. I put this treatment to the test, and it worked better than I could have ever imagined. But don't just take my word for it, because it has worked for a whopping 23,867 other people too. People like Gail Stevens and her husband Brian from Flint, Michigan, who wrote in to say this: "Hi David, when I read your story I realized just how similar it was to my husband's condition. He had uncontrolled blood pressure for years, and the doctors kept doing the same tests over and over, and when they couldn't figure out what to do, they just gave him more medication. He also had 2 stents put in, and his carotid artery on the right cleaned out. Despite the medication he was on, he never felt well and eventually had a TIA, which terrified me. The doctors didn't seem to have any idea what to do other than to double or even triple his meds. After discovering your program, his BP came down from 200/140 to 130/80 in just 3 weeks. The difference in his health and general well-being has been phenomenal. Thank you so much." And then there's Mariela Dominguez from Mitchell, South Dakota, who said, After being diagnosed with high blood pressure in 2010, my life has been one big worry. I discovered that I was allergic to all ACE inhibitors after a series of severe reactions. Despite going from drug to drug, nothing seemed to work. I would often feel dizzy and would pass out. I'd also feel a numbness in my limbs. All the doctors ever did was give me a different drug. They didn't seem to even consider any other options. Luckily, my brother found your website, and the change since has been incredible. My blood pressure went from 190/140 to 125/80 in just 15 days, and my health improved so much. Everyone who suffers from HBP deserves to know about this. And Joan Thomas from Jefferson City, Missouri wrote in to tell me this. I used to be fit, strong, energetic. I absolutely loved life. I'd never really been ill. But after being diagnosed with high blood pressure, everything changed. I was prescribed 8 different medications within the first 3 months, and all I could hear was everyone shouting, "Stroke." Although the docs kept pushing me to take the meds, I was falling apart. I was constantly fatigued and weak. My muscles wasted away, and I went deaf in my left ear. Eventually, I blacked out while shopping and woke up in the ambulance. I promised myself I would find another way to treat my blood pressure, and fortunately for me, I found David's website. Since then, my blood pressure has dropped significantly and my health has improved immeasurably. I'm so happy now, and I am returning to my former self. But I'm still bitter and angry about the medical profession's obsession with drugs, and the fact that they constantly ignore natural treatments that are proven to work. David, thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking on Big Pharma and bringing this program to the American people. Those are just 3 of the real-life success stories that I've received over the last few months after deciding to make this secret treatment program available to the public. I can literally show you thousands more. But what you're probably wondering right now is what this method actually is, and how a regular and unremarkable guy like me with 0 medical knowledge or training came to stumble upon it. Well, I'm going to reveal exactly what it is in just a moment, as well as how it came to fall into my hands, thanks to the hard work of a respectable and hardworking cardiologist and hypertension specialist, who was forced out of his job because he wasn't prepared to bow to the wishes of Big Pharma. I'm also going to provide you with the medical research that proves beyond all doubt why this method is so successful in lowering blood pressure. Research that will both shock you and probably make you extremely angry, because if you'd known about it sooner, you wouldn't be suffering the way you are now. So what is this secret treatment, and how did an average guy like me become the first to experience its incredible health benefits? Well, here's how it happened. Back in June of 2003, I was a fit and healthy father of 3 celebrating my 44th birthday. Or at least I thought I was fit and healthy. Because what should have been an enjoyable, fun-filled day for my wife and children turned into the beginning of a 12-year nightmare, where I was rushed to the hospital after developing an excruciating headache, shortness of breath, tightness in my chest, and a nosebleed. I thought I was having a heart attack. As I was whisked off to the emergency room, my youngest son Dominic took my hand, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "Daddy, please don't die." It brought tears to my eyes, because for a good few minutes, I thought I might. I really thought the jig was up. But it turned out I was okay, at least for the time being anyway. When the doctors took my blood pressure, it came out at 210/140. I didn't even know that this was dangerously high until they told me. As you probably know yourself, high blood pressure, or hypertension to give it its medical name, carries no symptoms, which is why it's called the silent killer. So if you've never had your blood pressure taken, you'll only find out about it when it suddenly hits you like a 10-ton truck. That's what happened to me. I had a stressful job, a recent death in the family, and 3 kids to look after, but I had no idea my blood pressure was such a problem until that day. But I left the hospital relieved that it wasn't a heart attack or a stroke. After all, it was just high blood pressure. How hard would that be to keep under control, right? Well, a lot, as it turned out. Over the next 12 years, I was put on a variety of medications, from ACE inhibitors, angiotensin receptor blockers, calcium channel blockers, beta blockers, and diuretics. Sometimes I was on 6, 7, or even 8 medications at once. And during these years, I lost any faith I ever had in the medical profession. Not a single doctor had even a basic understanding of nutrition, even though changes to diet and lifestyle are scientifically and medically proven to control blood pressure. Instead, all they did was prescribe drug after drug just to get me out the door. The problem was they didn't seem to have a clue how my body would react to each one. It was like they were using a suck it up and see approach. It was just trial and error. But hey, it wasn't their body they were playing around with, so what did it matter? I went through so many different meds and suffered from a whole range of different health problems. There were so many, I had no idea whether they were side effects of the medication I was on, or simply my body breaking down as the result of hypertension. I experienced chest pains and irregular heart rhythms that scared the life out of me. My legs, hands, and feet went numb for days at a time, at which point I was just given another round of meds. One drug turned me into a walking zombie, where I couldn't think, focus, or remember anything. I developed erectile dysfunction, which stressed me out even more. I was moved on to another drug to counteract that, which created a whole heap of new side effects. I was feeling wretched pretty much every day, unable to escape the vicious pharmaceutical cycle that I was now trapped in. Another incident saw my sodium levels plummet, and my creatinine, urea, and potassium levels all came back abnormal. The specialist told me that if I hadn't been scheduled for a blood test when I was, my kidney function would have failed totally. Panic and anxiety took over my life. I was worried about what my blood pressure meds were doing to my body and whether they might be the leading cause of all my problems. But my doctors were adamant that if I came off of them, I'd put myself at serious risk of a stroke or a heart attack. I felt completely trapped and powerless. I was damned if I did and damned if I didn't. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I got the biggest fright of my life. I was rushed to the hospital with a transient ischemic attack, or mini stroke. The brain can't function without a steady supply of oxygenated blood, and my high blood pressure had led to a blood clot, which had briefly blocked the flow of the blood to my brain. Over the next year, I suffered 2 more TIAs. Each time, I came out okay, but I knew I'd been lucky. I might not be so fortunate next time. The physician told me I was facing a full-blown stroke, or even a heart attack, and it could strike at any moment. But his only solution was more meds. Like many people with high blood pressure, I was a ticking time bomb, and I knew I needed to do something about it, and fast. But what? Clearly medication wasn't the answer. Nothing had worked up to this point, and if I continued along this road, I knew I was heading for an early grave. So I decided to take my health into my own hands. I scoured the internet looking for natural ways to treat hypertension. I read every research paper and analyzed hundreds of clinical studies. I visited my local library and combed through dozens of dusty old medical books. I tried every food, natural ingredient, herb, plant extract, or supplement that even remotely hinted at being able to treat high blood pressure. But then, just when I was close to giving up, something extraordinary happened. I stumbled upon an old and forgotten article from 1988, which would finally put me on the path to optimum health. It was an interview with a Dr. Miles Channing, cardiologist and hypertension specialist. According to the article back in 1982, Channing was the lead researcher on the INTERSALT study, which sent an international research team across the world to explore the link between salt intake and hypertension. The study comprised 10,079 males and females, aged from 20 to 59 years, belonging to 52 populations in 32 countries in Africa, the Americas, Asia, and Europe. During the study, which lasted 6 years, a remarkable discovery was made. It was found that a tiny, isolated tribe living in the rainforests and mountains of northern Brazil had 0 cases of hypertension. This tiny tribe were known as the Yanomamo Indians. In fact, their average blood pressure came out to an astonishing 103/63, compared to the average of 120/74 for all other 51 populations. And what's more, their blood pressure did not increase with age. Whatever they were doing had literally left them immune from hypertension. But here's the thing. Although the study confirmed previous reports that high blood pressure could be lowered by reducing salt intake, and this became the standard advice given out by the medical establishment for the next 30 years, Dr. Channing knew that it wasn't just a low salt intake that had managed to eliminate hypertension from the Yanomamo Indian population, because other groups he'd studied consumed barely any salt at all. Yet there were still numerous cases of hypertension within those populations. And this is where things got really interesting. Because according to the article, when the research team left Brazil, Dr. Channing stayed behind and spent the next 3 years studying the diet of the Yanomamo Indians in an attempt to find the secret to eliminating hypertension from Western society for good. During his studies of the Yanomamo Indians, Dr. Channing discovered that higher protein diets with high fiber intakes led to a massive reduction in high blood pressure risk, which was supported almost 30 years later when a study carried out at the Boston University School of Medicine and published in the American Journal of Hypertension in March 2015 reported a 59% risk reduction. Dr. Channing also discovered that the Yanomamo Indians' diet was rich in a little-known antioxidant known as coenzyme Q10, which is found in cold water fish like salmon, tuna, and herring, as well as dark leafy greens, nuts, shellfish, pork, chicken, and beef. And once again, a study carried out at the Cardiac Surgical Research Unit at Alfred Hospital in Melbourne and published in the Journal of Human Hypertension in April of 2007 supported this, concluding that coenzyme Q10 was able to lower systolic blood pressure by up to 17 points and diastolic blood pressure by up to 10 points. In fact, over that 3-year period, Dr. Channing was able to pinpoint the exact foods, herbs, spices, berries, and seeds that prevented the Yanomamo Indians from ever becoming hypertensive. He knew he was onto something potentially groundbreaking. He believed that he could eliminate hypertension for good, just as the Yanomamo Indians had done, so that no one would ever need to take blood pressure meds ever again, or have to suffer the horrible side effects that comes with them. So Dr. Channing put together a definitive list of ingredients proven to lower blood pressure and reduce any risk of hypertension. The article concluded with Dr. Channing stating that he intended to publish his research. As I read the final paragraph, I was overcome with excitement and shocked at everything I had just read. There was hope at last. I had been through hell for 12 years, but it turned out that there had been a proven way to beat this thing all along. But why hadn't anyone told me about it? Why didn't the doctors know about this? Why didn't everyone on Earth already have access to this information? It would have saved millions of lives. I couldn't understand it at the time, and I researched relentlessly for Dr. Channing's follow-up research, but I couldn't find any mention of it anywhere, or him. Where was the paper that Dr. Channing was planning to publish all the way back in 1988? I couldn't find it anywhere. So I decided that I had to get in touch with Dr. Channing myself. Here was a natural and completely safe way to beat hypertension. I simply couldn't let that opportunity slip through my grasp. So I searched for a way to contact Dr. Channing, but there was no sign of him anywhere, no references to his work, no contact details, no mention of him anywhere. Maybe he had died. But if so, why wasn't there any mention of him? It seemed like the guy had simply vanished into thin air. But why? This was a respected cardiologist, medical researcher, and hypertension specialist, with an unrivaled reputation, decades of experience in his field, and a man who had been involved in one of the most comprehensive and successful hypertension studies of all time. But he had all but disappeared. I couldn't understand it. I tried to contact the people behind the Inner Salt study. I wrote letters and emails to former members of his research team, and to the medical schools and research institutions that had any kind of link to the study, and I left hundreds of messages. I received nothing back. And then, when I'd all but given up hope, I received an anonymous email. It simply said this: "Hi David, I believe you'd been trying to get in touch with me. My number is..." The email was signed Dr. Channing, and he left a phone number for me to contact him on. Excited what he might have to tell me, I called the number immediately. And what followed was the most incredible conversation of my life. Dr. Channing explained to me that back in 1991, after completing his 3-year study into the Yanomamo Indians, he decided to return to the U.S. and put his research to the test. Working out of Harvard Medical School, Dr. Channing set about trialing his new diet, based on what he'd discovered studying the Yanomamo Indians, on 237 patients with various degrees of hypertension. Within an average of just 17 days, each and every patient lowered their blood pressure levels dramatically and effectively reset it permanently. Blood pressure levels fell from 210/140 to 115/68, from 200/135 to 118/70, from 190/120 to 116/74, and so on. And most importantly, stabilized. The results were astounding. Dr. Channing knew that he discovered a treatment that would send shockwaves through the medical community. A 100% natural and side effect-free treatment plan that would allow anyone, regardless of age or gender, to lower their blood pressure quickly and easily, and return themselves to optimum health in a matter of days. And crucially, eliminate the need for blood pressure meds completely. After completing the pilot study, Dr. Channing told me that he'd requested funding from Harvard Medical School to perform a larger study and get the results published around the world. But after waiting for months, his request was denied. As it turned out, although the head of his department had been blown away by his findings, when he'd taken Dr. Channing's proposal to his bosses, he was told that while they supported his research in private, they couldn't publish it, and they wouldn't be providing any further funding. I asked why that was, and the response still shocks me to this day. Apparently, Harvard Medical School wouldn't publicly support Dr. Channing's research because his treatment plan didn't include any medication. I sat there open-mouthed as Dr. Channing told me why. It turned out that 75% of the medical school's funding came from pharmaceutical companies, and they made it crystal clear to Harvard that if they allowed Dr. Channing to publish his research or even continue his work, every single cent of that funding would disappear overnight. Disgusted by the situation, Dr. Channing quit and never returned to medicine. I was shocked at the time, but as Dr. Channing explained the situation, it all made perfect sense. The last thing that Big Pharma wanted was a natural treatment plan for hypertension that could be categorically proven to work. Because blood pressure meds, like ACE inhibitors, angiotensin receptor blockers, calcium channel blockers, beta blockers, and diuretics, rake in billions of dollars every year. In fact, to give you an idea of just how much money Big Pharma are making from this market today, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, a whopping 70 million Americans now suffer from high blood pressure. That's 1 in every 3 American adults. And that's not to mention all the medication that's prescribed to treat other health conditions that are caused by high blood pressure, like angina, coronary artery disease, irregular heart rhythms, kidney failure, erectile dysfunction, stroke, neuropathy, osteoporosis, and much more. With a cash cow like this, there was absolutely no way that Big Pharma were going to allow anything to threaten it. But that's exactly what Dr. Channing did, because way back in 1994, he decided to make his treatment program available to the public. He created a simple, easy-to-follow guide that showed people how to lower their blood pressure naturally, without meds, and started handing it out in hospitals, medical centers, and clinics. But as the word spread about the results that people were getting, he was threatened and warned to keep his mouth shut. Cars would follow him. He started to receive silent phone calls, anonymous letters, and eventually he was forced to go into hiding when his family were threatened. That was 20 years ago, Dr. Channing said, and I haven't dared to speak out since. I just couldn't risk it. As I listened to Dr. Channing's story, I was desperate for him to help me, and I practically begged him to share his treatment program. After telling him about my struggles with hypertension and the side effects I'd encountered from all the medication, Dr. Channing agreed to hand over his program, but with only one condition. I did not give you this, Dr. Channing said. I am not legally responsible for what you do with it. This is on you, he said. Of course, I understand completely, I replied. 3 days later, and I received Dr. Channing's program in the post. The exact superfoods that Dr. Channing had discovered during his study were all there. Every ingredient, combination, and amount required were laid out, with detailed meal plans for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, as well as snacks and drinks. I was also shown which supplements to take, how many I should take, and exactly when I should take them in order to maximize their efficiency. My wife was as committed to the new diet as I was and helped me prepare all of my meals. Straight away, I found myself constantly checking my home blood pressure monitor for any change. Day 1, 2, 3, and 4 passed, but there was little difference. But Dr. Channing had told me that it would typically take around 2 weeks before I noticed any real effects. But then on day 5, something remarkable happened, and it continued every day for the next 2 weeks. I literally couldn't believe what I was seeing. But my systolic and diastolic blood pressure readings began to steadily fall, day by day. I went from a frightening 220/140 down to 140/90 in just 5 days. And over the next 10 days, my blood pressure continued to fall, until it had reached a perfectly healthy 113/71 by day 17. But not only that, I could feel the benefits too. Over the next few days, I felt like I was being reborn. My energy levels were up, my chest felt less tight, I was more alert and focused. My memory started to improve, and all of the feeling came back to my limbs. My kidney function bounced right back to where it had been more than a decade earlier, and my erectile dysfunction, which had troubled me for many years, finally disappeared. I was a new man. My wife was stunned at the difference, and so was my doctor. He said that in all his years of practicing medicine, he had never seen such a transformation in someone's health in such a short space of time. Not wanting to jump the gun too soon, I waited until 30 days had passed to see if my blood pressure was still stable. It was. It was showing 115/68, so I called Dr. Channing to tell him the good news. He picked up the phone and simply said 3 words. Worked, didn't it? I was laughing and crying at the same time and couldn't stop thanking Dr. Channing for helping me. We have to get this out there, I said to Dr. Channing. There are millions of Americans suffering right now who need to know about this. He finally agreed after much deliberation to allow me to put it online for all to see. But they'll find it, Dr. Channing replied, and they'll get it taken down. They always win, David. With Dr. Channing's help, I worked solidly for 9 weeks to turn his original treatment plan into a comprehensive, step-by-step, and easy-to-follow system for treating high blood pressure without any medication at all. And we called it Dr. Channing's Blood Pressure Protocol, a natural, safe, and scientifically proven program for lowering blood pressure from home. This protocol contains the exact step-by-step process that I took to lower my blood pressure from a dangerous 220/140 all the way down to a safe and healthy 115/68 in just 17 days. And it stayed at a healthy level ever since. Dr. Channing's blood pressure protocol succeeded in just 17 days where medication had failed for 12 years. And I want you to experience the same benefits yourself, starting today. In the blood pressure protocol, you will receive Dr. Channing's Yanomamo Food Guide, which includes the most up-to-date and complete list of Dr. Channing's miracle ingredients, scientifically proven to lower blood pressure.